And speaking of creating an atmosphere, I think we don't play enough recordings for our students. I got to know Dale Clevenger when I went to Abilene Christian to teach, and I met a Dr. Eugene Clevenger who taught chemistry at the university. And we were having coffee in the faculty coffee lounge, and he said, "Now you're the new band guy from the Midwest somewhere, right?" And I said, "Yes, from Michigan." And he said, "I have a nephew who's a musician somewhere up there. And here's a chemist who has no idea who his nephew is." And I thought, oh, that's great. There's a few of us up there. And a few minutes went by, and he said, "I think my nephew plays in an orchestra, maybe in Chicago." Well, you put Clevenger, Chicago Orchestra together. And I said, "Dale Clevenger?" He said, "Yes, do you know him?" I said, "No, but I'd sure like to." Before the day was over, I had Dale's home phone number and was calling incessantly. Dale is not real good about returning phone calls. I think his wife grew weary of my persistence because we are persistent. That's a great thing. Somebody closes this door and we make a new one. We open a window. We find a way to get it done. I think his wife said, "Call this guy back today. I don't want one more call from him." As a result of that, the next 2 years he came to Texas, the first time to solo with the band and conduct the band, do horn master classes. The second time, he came from Europe and soloed with the band at TMEA. It was a great coup. In that first visit, I said, "Would you tell me about your public school experience as a band member? How did you become, from Chattanooga, Tennessee, Dale Clevenger?" And he said, "Well, my band director was A.R. Cassavant." And some of us who are senior in the profession will remember that name. He was the band director at Chattanooga High School. He was a marching band guru. I found out that Dale Clevenger was drum major of the Chattanooga High School band. And I said, "Tell me your first memory of band, beginning band. What do you remember?" He said, "Well, I remember that Mr. Cassavant was very demanding in beginning band. We weren't allowed to talk when we came into the room. We weren't allowed to run, make any noise. We had to walk in silently because there was a recording playing. And we walked to where our instruments were stored, and we opened the cases by the number. The right hand does this latch, while the left hand does this latch, and the right hand can do that latch. Then both hands open the case. The right hand grabs the mouthpiece by the numbers." And he said, "Every time I did something not quite by the numbers, somehow Mr. Cassavant knew and was standing right over me. And he would say, 'Dale, close it up, do it again, and do it right.'" He said, when we all had our instruments out and we closed the middle latch and stood the case back up at attention, and we were in our chairs, and we opened our method books to the lesson, which was written on the board, Mr. Cassavant would turn down the record player. And he would say, "Today, class, we've been listening to whatever it was of that day. Do you have any questions?" And Clevenger said it's the first time he'd ever heard an orchestra. And he was a little puzzled by what were those other instruments in there. So he said, "Mr. Cassavant, there's some instruments in there that I don't know what they are." He said, "Very good, Dale, this is an orchestra. And an orchestra, in addition to these wind and percussion instruments, has strings." And Clevenger said when he was listening to this piece, and he doesn't remember, unfortunately, what the piece was, but it had some great horn stuff. Because he said at one point he looked at his horn as he's listening and couldn't comprehend that that could be the horn. He said, "Mr. Cassavant." "Yes, Dale, what is it?" "Was that the horn that had that great part?" "Oh, yes, it was. It was terrific, wasn't it?" "Mr. Cassavant." "What is it, Dale? This is your last question. We got to have a class." if I wanted to play in a group like that someday, what would I need to do? Well, here's a master teacher creating an atmosphere in a classroom, very simply. And this crusty old band guy said, well, Dale, you need to practice a lot more than you are now. You'd need to take private lessons and so on. Well, what does it mean to a sixth grader? He said he wasn't sure he knew what a private lesson was. But Dale's from a very religious family. Went home that day, and over the evening meal, his father said, Dale, would you offer thanks for the food? So he prayed to God for thanking him for the food and his family and so on. And dear God, help me to become one of the world's great horn players. And he said his father choked audibly at that moment in his prayer. And when the prayer was over, his father said, Dale, what was that all about? He said, well, I'm going to start practicing a lot, and I need private lessons. I'm going to become one of the world's great horn players. Life was changed in a beginning band class in Chattanooga, Tennessee, by a master teacher, creating an atmosphere. No one can do that but us. No one can administer certain parts of the program except us. You can't assign people to do the political, financial, administrative parts that are most important to us. And unfortunately, if we don't do those things, the music suffers. So we have to be good at that. No one, and we're getting to the most important things now, no one can give us time and desire to continue to grow. And these are the things that suffer the most when we're doing too much minutia, when we're setting up chairs and stands. So keep remembering what Mr. Reynolds said. Do only the things that only you can do. If someone else can do it, then you must get someone to do it. No one can keep us growing as a musician. You know, when you get your degree and your first job in the key to the band kingdom, and you have your baton, you don't have a license yet. You have a learner's permit. Our real education starts then. The universities do a great job preparing us, but there's nothing like walking into the classroom and doing it. No one can give us a desire to continue to grow as a conductor, our craft. I always felt like I should have at least as good a conducting craft as my students had on their instruments. Is that reasonable? I think so. And you know, I never really got there. I got better. I grew. But if I could have conducted with the same craft that my clarinet students did at Michigan State, I would have been a lot better. That's a part of our evolution that's ongoing, and we need to keep attending to it. We need to continue to grow as teachers, learning our craft. How do you get the band to play that well in tune? How do you, the teaching craft? No one can help us become a well-rounded person except us. No administrator is ever going to come to you and say, you need to go home earlier and attend to your family, and you know, you've been working too hard. Read a good book, go to a movie, walk around the lake. You know, no one's going to do that if we don't do it for ourselves. Another truth that I've learned is the things we can put off until tomorrow are the most important things in our life. Setting up chairs and stands, filing music has an immediate urgency. Meeting with the football coach must be done. Calling my mother, my 88-year-old mother, and saying, I love you, Mom, how's it going? I can put that off because I need to set up chairs and stands. So don't put off things that are most important. Do we have interests other than music that make us be well-rounded? If we're too narrow, as we get older, we're going to lose the passion. We need to be well-rounded. Physical wellness is important. When we get too stressed, too busy, too tired, the rehearsals don't go as well, do they? So we have to take care of ourselves. I would challenge you to write a personal credo this summer and define for yourself. It needs to be about one page, one computer double-spaced page, really short. What are your responsibilities to your profession, to your students, to the band parents, to your spouse, your children, and to our extended family, and to the Creator? Now, this is the hardest assignment you're ever going to have to do, but it's one you must do to sit down and define who you are. And I promise you that who you want to be when you write this credo is different than the person you are today. And it has to do with how we spend our time, because we're too busy doing silly things that someone else can do.